What's up, everybody? We're back to part two, where I rank all the Beethoven symphony and their movements. We left off at the end of Symphony 5, and now we're going to move on to 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I wanted to make two parts so that I have some good energy for all of them, right? So, as a reminder, our C and D categories is kind of like great music. You want to listen to it whenever, but not really the most representative of Beethoven's feel, taste, and skills. And then B is like, check it out. There's good stuff in here, but not really the most famous stuff. A is real solid stuff. It's great. And then S is sends you to the next plane, really next level, really transformative. So, let's just get started on Symphony 6. So, what's really nice about Symphony 6 compared to all the other symphonies is that, and I say this a lot, and I like the term, is that it is very thematically consistent. If you took all of these movements, scattered them around in a recording, you send it out to somebody who knows the symphonies but like aren't super familiar with them, it's fairly likely that people are going to be able to stitch together the Sixth Symphony fairly well. So if you told them, here's all the recordings 1 through 36, you lump them together to see which makes sense as a symphony, and I would think that on average the Sixth Symphony people are going to put together more correctly than others, because from the beginning to end it's quite different from things that were prior to this and stuff that comes after. And what the main difference is that the content is very serious, but it's not nearly as academically and intellectually serious as his previous works. There are not as many jokes, not as many tricks, and it seems like there's a more humble type of approach to the symphony. It's really not very much in your face until it really is, but it's a nice, gentle ride. So let's start off with movement 1, and some of what I say is going to carry on as I go through the movements, because again, it's thematically consistent. So the first movement, there's a lot of push and pull. A lot of push and pull, a lot of swells, but also mixed in between is just prancing. It's like not exactly dancing, but it's like you're walking around with a spring in your step. A little bit of this intentional, little higher energy walking. And I think that for some reason, right around the Sixth Symphony is when you kind of feel like repetition is helpful. That in previous symphonies 1 and 2, especially, that repetition feels like you needlessly extended something. But repetition in the Sixth Symphony, it has a more like building up effect, but it's not constantly higher energy. It's like you're just watching a stream, and a stream is pretty constant, repetitive, and it flows, and that's how it feels like, is like a constant flow of a stream. So the repetition also aids to elongate the phrases a lot more. So these are long lines. It's really not about this pieced up music where a lot of the instruments are trading off between one another, which there is a lot of. There is a lot of it. But with these longer lines, instruments are brought in as a ornament or an effect. And that's something that is very special about this symphony, is that it takes Western instrumentation and brings it back into nature. Because isn't that funny? Is that a lot of instruments around the world is very much focused around nature, but we have, at this point, it's like the industrial age that you have to use these industrial instruments to try and get back into nature. So a lot of it is about stepping away from just harmony and how the notes fit in, but there's more effects. And an instrument, and especially there's a big more intention behind the woodwinds, a lot more interplay between the oboes, the flutes, the bassoons, this whole bird chirpy like feel, but that comes up later. Really feels like a party for elves. And so I do think that, there's been a fantasia about number 6. And I think the fantasia for number 6 is fairly accurate to what I would think. I'm certainly biased because of that, because I grew up with that. But there is like this forest nature vibe. And it's kind of not what you would expect from Beethoven. So like I said, the 5th and 6th Symphony premiered on the same day. Both of them they're both more than 45 minutes long. So it's a long concert. And you've just finished up one of the greatest finales ever written. And you think that we're going to go back to this kind of technical music. But then the 6th Symphony comes around and it cannot be more different from the 5th Symphony. It's like on the 6th Symphony, there's a lot less Beethoven ego. Seems like less, I want to look smart. And it's really just a please come. See this new world that I've created. And he's not trying to look smart anymore on this one. It's really about just like a gift, almost. Feels like a gift. So, as I have said about movement 2s, a lot of times you're invited into a musical space, and that is so strong here. It's like you're pulled into this area that's so separated from real life. It is simply uplifts you and distracts you from anything else that's going on in your life. Very peaceful, serene. Almost always, if somebody has to say, what do you want to listen to? I would say this movement's quite good. So there is no other place for this movement except sublime. And yes, I think that the chemistry behind the orchestra, even though it's less potentially surprising and shocking and interesting, just the way everything blends together, I think it's like some of its parts is better than in whole. So I think it's just everything is in good balance. Feels good listening to it. Now, with the second movement, this push and pull becomes a very nice swing side to side. You got a little bit of this. And the feeling that was established in movement 1 never leaves. It's like a natural continuation of a linear story with the same characters. Because in a lot of the other symphonies, there are strong chapters, but you feel like there's a lot missing in between the movements. so you got to fill in the gaps. But like for the third symphony, you feel like there's like a theme about heroes and courageousness, right? Um, but um, what was I saying? But in the sixth symphony, there is no gap. It's just one story from beginning to end. Every word and chapter and page is there, so it feels well connected. Um, and so the second one really is, as I spoke earlier about the instrumentation coming in and out. It's like things are coming in as they're nicely invited in, especially those wind effects. And it's very interesting because some of what I said before about cheap snacks versus a nice meal, uh, it seems like I am being hypocritical, but some of these effects are like these snacks. But the fact that they're embellishing something underneath makes it feel like it's still a meal, right? It's kind of like you got this nice meal, but then you on top of it you get some sort of like extra stuff that makes it better, interesting. Um, and the sense I get for movement two is a lot of like togetherness. It's like love for each other, not like in a romantic way, but there's more orchestral cooperation that feels less intentional. It doesn't feel like Beethoven forced these ideas. Like in the Fifth Symphony, almost everything in the Fifth Symphony is forced. Like Beethoven designed that thing. But the Sixth Symphony doesn't feel like he's building something immaculate from the bottom up. The Sixth Symphony feels more like he's doing his best to describe something that's already beautiful. And because of that, it seems like again he's in terms of his presence, Beethoven is a little further away from it. And so the way that these instruments pass on the melody or progress the harmony, the piece forward, is very organic, cooperative, and it doesn't feel at all stitched together. It feels like every single note belongs there, just as it is. And any extra note would ruin it. That's just how perfect it is. And so, of course, you know, this is going in the S tier of Sublime. Just a continuation, but it's so you gotta understand also, it's like you got this one thematic idea, but the movements are very different. It never feels like, oh, this could have been a first movement, this could have been a third movement. They could have been arranged up. It's like, no, it's like each movement has its distinct identity in the story, but they, again, is well tied together. Yeah. So movement 3 continues this idea of jovial, high energy, positivity type of thing, but it's not in really rhythmically consistent, although there are some insanely catchy rhythms like you know that is so catchy, and it never leaves that idea of what was going on, the whole idea of natural reproduction, it is so much more in this third movement. Really, it feels like you're walking through a forest with very busy birds, that just want to get some. They're chirping everywhere, and you can hear them. And there are some birds that sing super well, and you hear them in these woodwinds. Because when you're walking around in nature, there are millions of things that you're not aware of that's going on. Sometimes in these days, you're walking around, you're so desensitized to nature that going out there and having all these senses going on, you hear and see all these things. It's such a break from what life can be these days. It's like stepping into a nice park, just because it's good for you. It's very therapeutic almost of how peaceful it can be, but also very catchy, very catchy. It's like the rhythm of nature is really captured here. Infectious. But of course, in this movement, I personally think probably the symphony has 5 parts, but this part I guess I'm just gonna lump in with the third movement. Is the happiness and jovial nature ends so abruptly. And then there's like this tentative, oh, we're starting to get some real big fat droplets coming in. And out of nowhere, thunder and lightning. Just this terrible or terrifying sound of the power of nature. It's like the power and terror of God's power when he summons natural catastrophes like that. And it's never before been captured in such a powerful and explosive way. Again, because of just the insane amount of timpani, all the brass going on together. Everyone's going crazy in these moments. And it's terrifying. And I don't know, it's really just up there in terms of how crazy that thunder and lightning section is. And again, fits in this whole idea of nature and what the beauty of nature can be, which can sometimes be terrifying, right? Thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, all of that seems like, as a human being, you're so insignificant to that. And that's how you definitely feel, is you feel very small listening to that part. If you know. Definitely, obviously, highly recommend listening to it. And the whole idea of that thunder and lightning is, obviously there's harmony that makes that happen. But it's just no longer about harmony. It's about an expression of an idea using music and notes. He's always done that. It's been a bit more abstract, but here it seems more tangible. It really strikes at you. And so, there is no other place to put this than, you guessed it, Sublime! Oh, it's so good, people. It's so good. You can't just be listening to this stuff and feel unfazed. If you're listening to this stuff and you feel unfazed, Beethoven's just not for you. This is just really up there in just Beethoven's ability to transport you into a different area. Even though you're sitting in the audience in a concert hall, you are lifted away from who and where you are. You leave your own body almost. You leave all your extra stuff behind. Um, and that elevation, very, very strong in the fourth movement. There is no break, and it continues this conceptual idea through a drizzle. There's a little drizzle in the opening, the breaking of the storm clouds, sunlight coming through, and it's the resume or the resumption or the continuation, the rebirth of vitality in life after this moment of panic and fear. You know, sometimes when you have panic, you don't come back very strong, you know, but the triumphant return of human vitality is long. It's a long process, and this whole movement, bar by bar, it just gets more and more and more uplifting. It's as if somebody just came up to you after like your stormy period of life or something, and they just kind of put a hand on your shoulder and say, "Hey, it's gonna be okay." You know, like, just keep hoping and dreaming, and the good will come. It's so optimistic. It feels like even though you were scared for a moment, it doesn't detract from your ability to continue on with life. You know, sometimes you'll get down in life through like an acute moment of suffering and just never get back to it because, you know, it's hard to be resilient. But this one's basically saying, like, you can do it. You can really come back and recover and be, you know, the best you can be. Better than you thought. Better than before. And everything about this fourth symphony is very simple. Nothing is surprising. It is really not a subversion of expectations as much as his previous works. And it feels right. It's like you have a brand new vinyl record and that record player is just going through that one groove just effortlessly. You know, it feels very right. So to some degree, it feels like this is very repetitive because it's the same theme, it's relatively simple. But the way that he brings it back and makes it different every time, it's like whenever you get bored of it, it comes back and you feel more revitalized. So whenever I listen to this, you know, if you like compare this to the Third Symphony Movement 1, I just said in that movement, everything is kind of surprising and it's hard to predict what's coming. It's written specifically to subvert those types of expectations. And so this is very different from it. And like I said, very different from Symphony 5, which just came up like 30 minutes ago, like 40 minutes ago for these people in the concert hall. And whenever I listen to it, it just makes me forget about all my struggles, lifts me of a bunch of my burdens. It takes me to a place with like peace and belonging, and you just want to stay there and not really come back to the world that you're used to, which can be filled with a lot of suffering. You know, the world can be pretty cruel. So to have somebody giving you that reassurance is through a musical way is very powerful, in my opinion. And so, you guessed it. It goes in the S tier. Like, and so, just look at this, people. Sixth Symphony is consistently sublime from beginning to end. You'll enjoy the whole symphony with no real spots where you feel like it's not correct. It feels so right. And it's so spectacular that you'll be listening and be constantly interested with what's going on, despite the fact that it really is like Beethoven is still holding your hand. He's not trying to like mess around with you at all. And so, masterful. I think that of all the symphonies of all time, there is not one that feels so inviting and creates a space that, again, you just don't want to leave. It's great. Great, great. It has to be my favorite, and so that probably spoils the rest of this list a little bit. Highly recommend, people. Highly, highly recommend. Alright, Symphony 7. Symphony 7 has a dear place in my heart. And what's interesting about Symphony 7 is that every movement has a rhythmic idea. The first movement is dun 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 dun. The second movement is dum 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 bum bum bam bam. The third one is right? And the fourth one is dun 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 dun. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2. Yeah, so each of them has a prevailing rhythmic idea that carries through the whole movement, with some exceptions. There are, steps away from the rhythmic idea. Like these movements they come in multiple parts, so yeah, it's not like it's there the whole time, but the main idea is fairly rhythmic all throughout. And this whole symphony is about kind of this unbreakable human spirit, that you can still have this joy that is unbreakable. And what I enjoy about this piece is that a lot of Beethoven's works are bipolar. You have happy moments, you have sad moments, and the happy moments are happier because you've had sad moments, and vice versa. Sad and angry moments can be very highly contrasted from happy moments. Beethoven wrote with bipolar, contrasting ideas. And so in this symphony, you have 1, 3, and 4 that are very just kind of positive energy. But you have the second movement that is so dark, so minor, that the contrast really overall in the symphony, the second movement provides a bit more context to provide more happiness in the other measures, right? And this Seventh Symphony is, I think, more akin to kind of the Fifth Symphony in terms of Beethoven definitely thought about this and wanted to look smart. Otherwise, he wouldn't stick to just one rhythmic meter and decide. That's like an intentional choice. That's a limitation that he put on himself. Not a limitation, but a rule that he put on himself. And how far can he go with maintaining this constant rhythmic idea? So it's kind of like this Fifth Symphony thing in terms of the architecture, guy putting things together, designing things, right? But it still has a bit more of that organic, cooperative orchestration that came from the Sixth Symphony. And so in terms of like skills and writing, it's great. There's just, it's really Beethoven at his finest in terms of like his skills, his demonstration of his skills. Um, so why do I say that? It's because, for example, the symphony starts with a prelude, and that prelude is 90% scales or more. It's all scales, um, in like one key, two, or yeah. And so very rudimentary introduction to the symphony to say, hey, this is the harmonic idea that's going to be going on through the whole symphony. It's an introduction, but it is like so painfully simple that I feel like that prelude only works because Beethoven wrote it. Like, if you told me that somebody else wrote this, it doesn't seem like it's so great because of how rudimentary it is. But that setting the tone, the harmonic tone for the rest of the piece makes that prelude very interesting. It stands out in hindsight. Um, so this also detracts a little bit from nature and things that we can physically observe. It returns back to that abstract musical space that the Fifth Symphony was a bit more. But the Seventh Symphony is somewhat not as surprising, um, or as interesting compared to, say, the Third Symphony, where every measure seems like a corner that you're gonna turn to and you see something totally new, right? Seventh Symphony, there's a little less mystery, but it has such infectious energy that um, you're being dragged along, but you're not like being treated like some fish looking at bait, you know? Sometimes you get the sense that Beethoven doesn't really respect the audience member and treats them like agricultural stuff. Like, you just want to try and lure that fish in. And this is one of those moments where it feels like that. He's the fisherman and we're the fish, and we're being kind of dragged into this thing. Which, again, compared to the Sixth Symphony, that kind of forceful dragging in feeling is not there. It's like Symphony 6, you're entering on your own volition. And so, some of the Beethoven quirkiness is back. You got some more jokes. You got some more things that perhaps you don't really agree with for the first time. You maybe have to develop some Beethoven tastes to really feel good about everything that's going on in there. So yeah, the ego is back. Beethoven is back, and you can hear it in how everything is written. So, the first movement I will put in the A tier. It's great. It's just clean writing. Yeah, solid. More than solid. Just really up there. As I was alluding to earlier, is that this movement 2, it is really big contrast to the positive energy that's going on. And Symphony 5 movement 2 has a funeral death march that's very grave, and serious. And this movement is quite similar to the feel of that movement, except it's really not about death. I don't think that Symphony 7 Movement 2 is about dying, things after death. It's about struggles and suffering while alive. Because everyone suffers, and that there's something common amongst us humans in that identity of being sufferers, right? Sometimes you'll be grieving. Sometimes you'll be angry. You'll be hopeless. Like I go through this. When I was in my master's and I was taking the train a bit more, I would listen to this movement, And on certain days where it be raining or it's gray, I have this movement going on in my headphones. You cannot help but look at society in a dystopian way, feeling like there is no hope, there is no escape from this condition, and that you just have to accept that part of life is enduring life. It might not even be good or bad things, it's just things that you have to deal with, you know? Um, and so it provides such, again, a contrast where there are contrasting parts within this movement where you feel like there's a little bit of solace and appreciation for the struggles. Like, for instance, like even when you're depressed, you have moments of solace and appreciation. You know, sometimes being sad does allow you to think about your blessings a bit more, even when it's difficult, right? It's hard to think of optimism when you're super depressed. But you do have moments where perhaps you see children playing and you think like, wow, they have joy, and that perhaps there's hope for other people in society, um, while you are, you know, just trying to get through life. And you gotta wonder, did the Seventh Symphony really need this? Could it have been a little bit more upbeat and major and more consistent? And I think probably yes, but the fact that movement 2 is there makes the whole symphony something different. And you'll see what I mean with the other as I keep going on. Of all the Beethoven pieces, this is probably the simplest one. This is the easiest one to put together in an orchestra. Super easy to play, but there's so much weight behind everything. And so you got this distillation of the music, like in Symphony 5, Movement 1, of how elegant the basic elegance behind his note choices, but it has that heaviness like I was speaking to with Symphony 3, Movement 2. So just the way that I feel listening to it, and just how hard it can hit me during these types of like hard times, there's really no other place. Then the top spot, people. Symphony 7 number 2 is peak Beethoven. Peak Beethoven. And a lot of people may disagree on that, but it's just peak Beethoven. There's nothing that's more Beethoven than that movement. You're welcome to disagree because everyone has their own favorite, but just the way that it can hit you and how simple it is, I think tells you that he nailed it. You can write a lot of simple stuff that just doesn't click, but the fact that it hits you so hard, it's like he really got it in the bullseye. That's how I feel about it. Oh, so good. So good, people. So good. Alright, so now we're going back to movement 3. A lot more upbeat. So remember, it's and you've heard certain third and fourth movements that are where the ideas and the lines are very short, very in and out, very interweaved, pieced together in a very condensed way. And that's really just over the top. Like he takes this idea of how do I break apart something and piece it together in so many different ways, in so many different layers. That is really showcased here. the fact that the music is passing along so much, you have to be paying attention. If you're watching and you want to see where the sound is coming from, you have to be paying attention a lot. And it's really cool if you're in a hall and you see this with nice acoustics, you can feel like it really, the sounds are coming from somewhere else every time. So yeah. It's also very, very swift interchange. And then in those third movements, there are some slow moments where you get to relax a little bit. There's a little bit of time to reflect, catch up, catch a breath, and it just feels like life can be a race sometimes, but there are moments after a good day's work, or just you take a little break and you just relax for a little bit and reflect on what's going on. Then you're back at it. And that's just, it just kind of shows that in this movement that life is not a marathon, it is 1,000 sprints, and that you do have to take breaks so that you can keep going strong again. Movement. I didn't even rank this yet. So I put movement 3 in the A tier. Again, very clean writing. Just immaculate stuff. But does it really teleport you to another plane of existence? No. But the energy is there and it transfers to you, so it's still quite good. The finale, so no finale has been this strong since the finale to the Fifth Symphony, which is not too long ago. But there's like this uncompromising energy, jubilance, and positivity with little to no detraction from minor ideas. It really is undistracted. There's some delusion, right? Some people who are manic, they have delusions that they are invincible. And that's how it feels. Is like you're really blindsided to all of doubt, all of the things that say, okay, what you're doing is not wise, this is a dumb decision. All that's gone. All you can think is, of course I can do it. A little bit of like a narcissistic positive energy. It's maybe narcissism is not the right thing, but just a blindness to doubt. And so sometimes while listening to this fourth movement, you gotta kind of be in the right mood to really enjoy it for what it is. Because if you're a person that's plagued with doubt a lot, it's hard to connect to this movement because of how all of that doubt and suffering, all that's been allocated to the second movement of this symphony. And so this is really the piece that isolated that phrase for me. You have to buy into Beethoven. The more you buy into this movement, the more it can just take you and exhilarate you. But I personally think that even though Symphony 5, the finale for Symphony 5 is like consistently 11 out of 10, there are moments in this finale that are just like 12 out of 10. And so on average, I think it's like not as intense, but there are just some moments that just, it's real powerful stuff. And so, yeah, when you think that it's going hard, it goes harder. It's like a dance of busy bees. It starts out so energetic, like a race, but then just never slows down until the end. So, I gotta put this in the A tier. You gotta rile yourself up to it a little bit. You know, it's but overall, Symphony 7, very nice. It's very consistent in terms of its quality. You feel like pretty much everything is just like correct. And then you get this real deep, striking or movement 2 that will, no matter who you are, whether you know classical music or not, if you're in that concert hall or even just listening to this movement in isolation on your favorite streaming platform, that is going to hit you no matter who you are, no matter what country you live in, no matter what musical center your culture is based around. Even if you're so far detached from Western music, I still think that there's something very innate and human in that second movement that will strike anybody across all cultures. That's how powerful I think that movement is. So I'm gonna stop there because I can just go drone about how much of a fan I am, a fanboy of the second movement. Uh, Definitely one of my favorites, even though I acknowledge that other symphonies had better quality, but I just like the package and just how clean things are. Yeah. Not necessarily sublime, but very good. All right. So the Eighth Symphony. So the Eighth Symphony is substantially shorter than the other symphonies. It's like slightly more than half as long. And it is a continuation of this jubilant idea, positivity. But in this one, a lot of Beethoven quirks come in. A lot more jokes, a lot more character, a lot more clowniness. But it kind of seems like there's some backward stepping involved. So again, I might be insulting the symphony, but around this time, Beethoven has been deaf for so long that he might not, at this point, know really what something sounds like. You know, he has like great ideas, and you see in a lot of his later works, you'll see the same thing. Is that some little bit of things are lost because he's been deaf for so long. But that deafness and separation from sound allows you to create music that's never been heard before. Literally. You know? So you see ideas that are a little half-baked. It again goes back to like the Symphony 4 feel of, and maybe this 8th Symphony was being co-composed during the same time as the 7th Symphony. It has like this, you know, the 7th Symphony jubilance, but it also has Symphony 2 vibes in terms of how the way that the 8th Symphony brings back these minor tones, and the minor tones are not necessarily so much as functional harmony that creates energy towards something. It's really just sad, scary. Very typical kind of these classical Haydn snack-sized ideas. And so it feels half-baked compared to his previous works. Also, you'll find that things end very abruptly at times, and that there are more grand rests where the whole orchestra is silent for a little while. And it feels a little awkward. If you're like listening, you just suddenly hear like a little tiny part where nothing is playing. And that to me is starting to make me feel like Beethoven doesn't know what this sounds like in a concert hall. He knows what it's like to sound in his head, but I think he would agree that this is not like his greatest work. So it feels like Beethoven kind of thought this was cool, but it did not sound cool. So, yeah, I'm gonna put this in the D tier. It's good to listen to. It's not bad. In fact, it's like probably better than 90% of all classical music that you'll ever listen to, but something's a little missing from the picture. But Beethoven's definitely there. But it's strange to think that Symphony 8 sounds like a formative time because I think it kind of is. It's like a formative time where Beethoven is starting to pioneer the late romanticism type of ideas that grows further with Brahms and with Mahler and these the German music. Um, yeah, so it's more complicated. It's not simpler, it's more complicated, but a little loose. The second movement is not very different. Like movements 1, 2, and 3 in any other symphony of Beethoven's, they're very different. Um, Even in Symphony 6, when you have one thematic idea going throughout everything, the movements feel different. And I didn't get that sense from 1, 2, and 3 for Symphony 8 that they kind of could have been rearranged in any of the movements. And that's kind of strange to say in a Beethoven symphony. The ideas are kind of simple, they're static, and things that are unpredictable seem like, again, jump scares. It doesn't seem very well set up for us to be surprised. Just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's kind of nice. There's nice music, but I just don't like. Well, another thing is that the second movement feels sort of akin to that third movement in terms of the idea of a rhythmic type of movement. You see some really short and choppy rhythm that is very crucial in the Beethoven aesthetic, as you want short, short, short. And that is very much prevalent in this movement. You get to see how short things can get. And yeah, but in some, this movement kind of sounds more like Haydn, which is kind of an interesting thing to note, is that you're on Symphony 8 and still those classical roots still exist, right? That's kind of the thing about Beethoven, is he's left the mold so much, but some of it doesn't leave. And some of this Haydn type of stuff comes back. So I put this in the D tier because not a big fan of Haydn. As I said in the previous video. So not much to say about movement 3. As I said, it's very not rhythmically identifiable, which, is very, again, so detached from the symphonic identity that Beethoven spent 7 symphonies to figure out, and then it's just like all kind of gone. And so I'm just gonna put this one in the D tier. Movement 4 is slightly more interesting, but it's a little weak again. It's got this jubilance and this energy. There seems to be a little bit more of like a romantic side of things, like youthful love type of things as told by an old man who's deaf, And so it feels a little out of touch. Some of the harmonic devices that he uses, like there's a little bit where it can be fugal, but it's just not fleshed out at all. So it doesn't seem like things really matured into fruition. And even though it seems like very intentional that Beethoven definitely made decisions and were like very committed behind the decisions, you don't see Beethoven feeling doubtful of something. It's like he meant to put it there and he likes it there. But it sounds like random noise sometimes. That, again, I get this feeling that Beethoven doesn't know exactly what something sounds like. So, a little bit of random noise stuff. Um, so that said, I mean, Symphony 8, everything is in the D tier, but again, I'm not saying it's a bad piece, and I think that with all of this in mind and what I've been saying, like, there's a nice, interesting juxtaposition you can be considering while listening to Symphony 8 and realizing how different things are becoming now that he's becoming kind of this older man. All right. Some of what I said about Symphony 8 just there about Beethoven starting to redefine this late, or not redefine, but define late romantic music, Germanic music, carries over into this Ninth Symphony. This is the longest of his symphonies. None of them, even if you tried, it's hard to get one that's over 60 minutes. This one is like 70 minutes, can be 80 minutes, insanely long. And so Beethoven had a mission on this. It really is like him believing that this is his magnum opus. I don't know if he actually meant that, believed that, but this really just seems like the biggest work that he's ever done. Um, but there are some still elements where the ideas in the first movement, um, that the first movement just kind of develops ideas. They come in and out pretty fast, and they don't seem to stick around for very long. So they seem fleeting. Things seem, like they're moving together, but it doesn't feel so organic, which, again, if you listen to the first movement of the symphony and you see that as a stepping stone to things that is to come with Brahms, um, that you can see that it is kind of a stepping stone to that next level. Um, so movement one is so some more general stuff about this symphony. Like, remember when I said, like, in Symphony 7 there's a bipolar comparison between suffering and delusional happiness, you know inescapable suffering versus delusional jubilance, right? And I asked that because in Symphony 9 is explicitly about freedom, human liberty, and collective joy. But nothing else in the symphony is a juxtaposition of that joy and exuberance. You don't have like a deep, dark thing to remind you about why you should be joyful. If you've never had pain, can you be relieved from it? I don't know. It's like it's a hard question. It's like, do you need the bipolar comparisons in order to appreciate one or the other? And I think in Beethoven's work that comparison is firmly there, but it doesn't show up in this one. So you don't see the despair and suffering in this one as much as you would see in like Symphony 3 Movement 2, Symphony 7 Movement 2. Uh, yeah. So I don't think that the idea is very solid in terms of like symphonic identity that Beethoven has just been constructing over his entire freaking career. But it's still very good. It's very interesting. So I'm gonna put this behind his first symphony. Interesting to listen to. I think it's just it's nothing too special aside from the fact that it's a little bit more unusual, but still very much Beethoven. So, second movement is like it's like a movement 3. You got like this Symphony 7 movement 3 vibes, like but it's not nearly as infectious. It kind of feels like there's some manic energy from people that you don't want to associate yourself with. So let's say like manic financial bankers. You don't want to hang out with manic financial bankers who have like narcissism and personality disorders and all of that, you know? So I don't find it very infectious. Um, it's really starting to sound more like Brahms, and you can't, if I just showed you movement 2 of this symphony, it would be hard to guess if you had to lean between one or the other. So if we had a game saying, here's a bunch of Beethoven, here's a bunch of Brahms, mix them up, we do a little musical quiz, I think this one would be very hard to pinpoint as one or the other. It's not bad, it just doesn't feel like a movement 2 that, again, Beethoven has been sticking to. It's very different. It's not what you would expect. Um, yeah. The the Brahms also tends to write extremely long lines. Um, and so this one is kind of feels like Brahms, but in again more this classical snack size bits. Um, so I think this one is interesting, but and not entirely skippable. But I don't know. It's not. It's really you listen to it as appreciation for who Beethoven is becoming or has in his twilight years. Um, so I will put movement 2 in the C tier. Movement 3, not much to say about it, really. Movement 3 is just kind of what I said up to this point, basically. Um, but it's like now doing this Symphony 6 movement to nice, slow, idyllic presentation. But why is that coming up in a movement 3? It's not what you would expect from a Beethoven symphony. The transitions, the modulations, the harmonic transitions are far more random, and it's like you cannot expect them because of how disruptive they can be. So very out there, very out there, um, very frantic. Not much I can say about it more than what I've already said. So I put Symphony 9 Movement 3 in the C tier. Now Symphony 9 Movement 4, I should say that this symphony just stands alone, really. Like, I don't think that this tier list is very appropriate for the Ninth Symphony because the Ninth Symphony is not the same paradigm as I've said. It's not the same paradigm as your typical Beethoven symphony. There's something very explicit about what Beethoven wants to do. and he actually writes words for it. You know, he tells you exactly how to feel about it. And this choral stuff, not so much funky harmony, it's nice choral stuff, and that distinctive Beethoven harmony just comes back. Feels nice. You got this meal feeling again. And honestly, it is what it is. It is as famous as it is, and it is deserving of that fame. But in terms of analyzing this, the value and all the stuff that the symphony is, that would probably be a separate video, talking about a lot of things outside of the music. You know, a lot of why is this symphony so famous and relevant to our modern society? It can be a whole nother video, and I just want to not go into it so much and just talk about the music and the quality of the music, but the significance of this work cannot be understated. It's probably one of Beethoven's most important works, but in my opinion, it's not fantastic. I mean the symphony. This last movement, however, yes, it is as good as people say. But for me, I wouldn't consider this sublime, just A tier. Everyone's got to listen to it. Everyone's got to study a little bit. And keep the message close to heart about the Ode to Joy, right? And so it's a very interesting conclusion of the series of symphonies is that his Ninth Symphony is no more better than his Second Symphony, is kind of how I feel, which is interesting. They're kind of similar to me. But yeah, here's the list. I feel pretty happy about it. I spent some time deliberating, had to move things around a couple times, but I'm happy with this list. Really, you cannot go wrong with Symphony 7 or Symphony 3, 6, and 7. Symphony 5 is definitely, you go to it for the show value. It is famous for a good reason. Some of it's more famous than others. Symphony 4, skippable. If you want to get a taste for what Symphony 4 is, just check out this fourth movement. It's probably going to be enough to give you a taste. Then Symphony 8 and 9, you gotta kind of take everything with a grain of salt, start understanding that Beethoven's become a totally different person now. He may be a little out of touch, but his later Beethoven, a lot of late Beethoven stuff is very interesting to think about and analyze. But in terms of like enjoyable music, you can say whatever you want. But of course, last thing I want to say is that I'm surprised that Symphony 1 is so good. Like you would think that things would start from 1 and then go progressively better. But the fact that Beethoven came out with Symphony 1 establishes its identity, and that the symphony overall is like fun and good to listen to, I think tells you that was enough to set the stage for what's to come. So, yeah, let me know what you think. If you like certain movements more, let me know. If you have different opinions, let me know. Because again, I would like to learn more, especially about Symphonies 4, 8, and 9 to get more context, because I feel like those are the symphonies that I don't connect to as much. I feel like I still know them, but I don't connect to them as much. So, yeah, if you have more knowledge about those things, do let me know. And if you want some more of these types of ranking, tier list stuff, let me know about that too. I have some other topic ideas, so that's to come. But if you want to see a specific idea, let me know. All right, y'all. This is a lot of fun for me. This is a lot of fun. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't gonna be fun, right? And I hope you had fun too. Maybe learn a thing or two. Maybe what I said is fake knowledge, fake science. So if anyone wants to correct me, please do that as well. I'll make sure to write some notes if there are corrections I need to make. All right. Well, happy listening. I hope that all these symphonies are so great, and it is such a great gift to us mere mortals. 200 years after some of this stuff has been composed, that we can still listen to music that is invincible and will not deteriorate or rust pretty much ever. It's timeless masterpieces in here. All right. So yeah, on that note, I will now press the stop recording button. Thanks. Keep it real, y'all.